to people you want to hire, investors who you want to have, put their money in. You've got to sell it to your customers.
Welcome, everyone. We're back to another Fearless Founder podcast. And particularly for today, we have a dashing man, our own Benson Metcalf. And we're excited because he has the perspective of being an operator in 5 different companies before he started 2.0 Ventures as the managing director and CEO. And so, Errol Flynn, we're really happy to have you here. Welcome.
I'm a little concerned most of your audience may not know who Errol Flynn is, but I know. I appreciate the comparison. It's great to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're terrific. And I'll tell you, Ike, Benson is not just a smart. I've never seen someone hustle as much as he has displayed in the short couple of years that we've been together as friends. He really knows how to dig in. And imagine starting a fund from scratch, right? Going to fulfill all of the promises, making sure that all of the portfolio companies are taken care of. Benson does it all. And he's got a small team, but he is the main powerhouse. So we're really happy to have you. With that said, Benson, anything else that you want to share with the listeners and or viewers about what's taking you to get to this point?
Yeah, maybe I'll just give a little bit of a background sketch of my career. I studied econ and finance at BYU, and I thought I would get right into consulting. And I ended up first doing operations. I went into a manufacturing company called Freeform, and that was a fantastic experience because I went right into a managerial role. The week of graduation, I had 6 employees, and the week after graduation, I had 22 employees, I mean, it was just like, a very good way to start my career, hands-on, leading people. It ended up being 4.5 years at that place. And then we sold the business, and I went off to business school at the University of Virginia. I got my MBA, and at the end of that is when I went back into consulting for the first time. So I went to Bain & Company. I was based in Dallas, Texas. And at that point, my wife and I had just recently welcomed our 3rd child. And life was really busy, and consulting was all consuming, working basically 7 days a week. I mean, I had a few breaks, but it was a lot, and traveling 4 days and sometimes 3-4 nights a week. 2 years later, we had an opportunity to move to Australia and open up the Perth office for Bain & Company. And that was kind of an entrepreneurial experience within a big company. And we were on the cutting edge and the sort of the bleeding edge of the business, being out so far away. Perth is like drill a hole through the earth from here and you're there in Perth. I mean, it's really far away. But that experience was phenomenal and taught me a lot about business development and team development and office culture and all these things. And a year and a half later, we came back, and I did one more pretty long project with Bain before then jumping into private equity as an investor. And I went to a group called Tower Arch Capital in Draper, Utah. And that's when we came back. And that was a fantastic experience of learning the deal cycle and the due diligence process and how you combine debt and equity in transactions. And I then kind of had the itch to get back into operations. And so I left. I went into Pluralsight, which was a tech company in Utah that was just kind of on the rise. And I took a role there as the head of strategy and corporate development. 2 years later, we went public. A year after that, I sold out and I went to a smaller tech company called SaltStack, where I was the COO. And we built that business leading into this thing called the pandemic, and then ended up selling it during the pandemic, which was quite an accomplishment, I think, all things considered. Sold the entire deal over Zoom, never met anybody face to face. And then I took a step back to kind of think about what I wanted to do. And that's when a mentor guided me to think about a fund. And 4.5 years later, here we are, a venture capital fund of 40 million under management, 9 different portfolio companies. And it's been an amazing ride. And I feel like right now I've got elements of operations, consulting, and investing coming together in the role that I have today.
Wow, Ike, what do you think?
That's a great ride. side.
Yeah, tight communication on everything he's done. Wow, congratulations. Yes,
Thanks.
thank you for reminding us in detail. What a journey. I have to say, when you're in school coming out and you go from however many 6, 7 to 22 employees, that's a shock to the system, isn't it?
It is. And they were round the clock. I was running part of the factory where we had 24-hour operations. And so, basically my whole team at that time was maybe high school was the most education they'd had, and just warehouse manufacturing facility staff. So it's a different type of clientele and employee base than a consulting firm, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic. But there's no better way to lead people and manage expectations and hold people accountable than being thrust into it. There's no other way. And what a great start. And I can see the operator leadership, the econ undergrad, the math proclivity going straight into PE and such. I said, whoa, that's a powerful combo. Deadly combo, as they would say. In India, a deadly combo. That's a great way to do it. No, it's fantastic. Hey, along this journey, you've met lots of people. Ike has got his own new business. We've gone through a lot together. Ike, you can jump in as well.
If you don't mind, like I have huge respect for VCs that gives away the control. Here's my money, go build something with this one. Like that's one of the reasons I didn't do that after my exit. I like to control my own destiny. I went back to starting my own from scratch. Like, can you tell us what do you look for future successful entrepreneurs? They're just starting, and that's I'm guessing you're at the seed level with $50 million. What characteristics you look for, especially if that's their first time being an entrepreneur, which is our audience.
So seed and Series A is the point of entry that we have with our fund, and I actually don't really care what we call it. I kind of feel like it's more about the business and the founder and the sort of the readiness that I feel like they have, as opposed to whether it's a seed, an A or a B. But certainly from a capacity standpoint, our fund has only so much capital, and so we tend to be here at that stage. There are, I think, several really important things to consider when we look at a deal, and it starts with people. The founder, and sometimes there's 2 or 3 founders. We have to get to know them and see them in different environments to try to gauge their passion, their conviction, their coachability, their open-mindedness. You want a visionary. You want someone that is seeing a big vision and aggressive to go pursue something that's so daunting. And, it's a tough gig to be an entrepreneur. You also want them to be open-minded and be curious. And one of the ways that we gauge that is by going through kind of a vision exercise and asking them, where this business is going to be in 5 years. And oftentimes they will have, 5 to 10 things going on at the business that are all important.
At the least.
Sometimes. And so it's like, we could be this, we are this, we're going to be this. And suddenly you've got this like world-changing vision. And what we want to see is that there is an ability, or at least a receptivity, to talk about how you get that focus to the here and now as you kind of make milestones towards that vision. You work backwards from it and kind of map out those milestones. Perhaps a little bit like philosophically for our fund and my approach, because I was an operator, I've been venture backed. I've been through an IPO, as I mentioned. We're actually not filtering for businesses that we think could be public companies someday. That's not a big priority to us. I think that founders are sometimes conditioned to think that that is the path and that's the ideal path. And I disagree. I think founders have lots of options of off-ramps for their business, if you think of it that way. Not every founder wants to run that business for decades. They have lots of ideas. Typically, entrepreneurs are like, on to the next, like you are, Ike, you're doing something else. And so what I like to do, and our team, we try to unlock that ability to talk about what else is in your future? I mean, do you have other business ideas you want to run? Okay. If so, how much are you trying to create out of this opportunity? And if you're willing, we'd like to talk about what that target is. Are you trying to make 50 million or 100 million or more? It doesn't really matter what the number is, but if there's a goal, then we can figure out if that's an aligned goal for us and our investors, because when there's alignment, there's real speed and power in execution. I really want to understand what the founder's true goals are, not just these conditioned statements that Series A, Series B, Series C, IPO, and so I kind of break that down. I'll pause there because that's kind of the people element of it.
I have to ask you, because I just sent out a couple of texts this morning and you just brought it up. You wrote down that part of the way that you assess whether or not the founder has element of what I call self-awareness and an ability to adapt and change, you said, is to go through a vision exercise. Are you telling me that you figured out a way to assess humility?
I suppose that's a way to say it. I think humility is a little more than just coachability. I think gratitude is actually the core of humility.
Oh, I like that.
If you're grateful, that is a demonstration that you are recognizing there are people and forces and things outside of you that are contributing to your life and your success. So I would just add that to maybe your comment there, Bino.
Yeah, my Benson, maybe you agree, you don't. To me, it's the maturity to handle conflicts. So the entrepreneur's world is full of conflicts. Benson, you said, you want to be confident about your vision, but you want to be able to change, flexible enough to change it.
Yes.
You want to execute what you have in mind from the product perspective. Oh no, wait, I have to take user input as well, the customer input.
Yeah.
I have to grow fast and all that, and wait, I need to balance my budget, and I can't run out of money. It's like full of these conflicts for an entrepreneur every day, 100 million times. But how do you, I think Benson is trying to assess that, how you have the confidence and the vision and plus the ability to be flexible. If you're mature enough to be able to judge these, and when we're talking about vision, I'm going to be confident, I'm going to be committed to it and all that. Then 2 seconds later, you might be talking about what are you going to do if a competitor comes, and what are you going to, and then you have to switch the mindset. And am I making sense?
Yes, spot on, Ike. And I think just connecting that to the humility point from Binoy, there are pivots that almost every business has to go through, because as an entrepreneur, you're not going to get it exactly right when you launch your business and your product and you go to market and you get the user feedback, like you mentioned, Ike. Sometimes that product isn't quite right for the problem, or sometimes it's better suited to a different problem. And so you're, in one way or another, you are faced with new information that gives you the chance to pivot if you're humble enough to do it, if you're courageous enough to change, or talk to your board about hey, we thought we were going into this healthcare vertical, but it actually is better suited to a manufacturing vertical, and so forth.
I love it. I know you got
my mind is morphing into other things. Benson, talk about, you see a lot of operators in the board meetings, and when you're assessing them, you've been through this before as well. There's a million things going on with the business. How is it? What would you advise to the entrepreneur to stay calm and make strategic decisions as needed, rather than run? It's every entrepreneur that I know works. 80 hours a week. Everybody's working. Everybody is running very fast.
Yeah.
But are you also running smart? How do you assess that, and what kind of advice do you give them? Coaching do you give them? So
a vision, when we talk about it in our context, is something descriptive and specific and compelling that is a direction that you're taking your company. And when we talk about the exercise, we're trying to collaboratively form that, or at least hear their version of it and see if they're able to shape it. Let me give you a little vignette. Just last week, we were on a Zoom call with one of our portfolio companies who is doing really well relative to their market. They're like 30% faster growing than their market, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And they are running into some needs for capital to continue their growth, and we as a board are on board with that. And the conversation that we were having was the call had just started, and the CEO launches right into this detail of the kind of the uses of capital if we were to raise $5 million, and but had skipped right over some vision slides that I had asked they put in. And I interrupted, I paused the conversation to go back to vision, because I think that you really helpful to come back and kind of beat the drum. What we found out, and was actually really incredible, is that there was some language in the vision that wasn't quite right. And I didn't know that I felt that way, but when we put it on the screen and all of the board members and the management team started talking through it, asking questions, what does premium mean to you? Like, how does that word land right now relative to what our product is? That was just one example of a word that like kind of struck a chord. And it was in that exercise of like spending probably an extra 30, 40 minutes on vision is what clarified the focus of the fun of this growth round in the first place. And so when you think about like, how do you stay focused? How do you not get overwhelmed with all that there is to do? In my mind, the role of the founder and CEO is to keep you and the team and the board, both directions, focused on the most important thing, which is the vision. And if you can then connect what priorities you have today to the vision, you stay locked in.
I really think we should double click on this one for the entrepreneurs. I've lived through that. I know it gets tiring to tell the vision 20 times a day with the employees, with the media that's trying to interview you, with the awards you're chasing, with the video recording you're doing for the website, like the onboarding, but that's part of the job.
Yeah,
I know it's boring. You can't automate that, and especially with the board. I even went to the length where before the board meeting, I would call or schedule time with the board members to explain things, like to talk about the vision and what we're trying to, where we are, get their input even before the board meeting. Board meeting was like the end, not the start of a conversation. So as a founder, you have to keep everybody closer and then at the top of your mind, right?
Yes, absolutely. And you know, the CEO and founder is the most engrossed in the business and the vision and the problem more than anybody else. And so it's easy for founders to sometimes forget to bring people back into that place. Board members have lots of other things going on. They have maybe 6 or 7 or 8 businesses that they sit, have a board seat on. They come back to this business every, few days or weeks. You got to help reorient them. Employees, they are, by nature, they have less on their plate and their scope is more refined and focused than a CEO. So they need help to zoom out and see things. So I think that you're right. Like beating the drum it can be exhausting, but you also sometimes don't realize unless you kind of put yourself in each of those different seats, yes, that they all need help to see it. And your job is to help bring it to the fore.
Yeah, I've had so many of my CEO clients eye roll when I tell them, I think you underestimate that you need to do 10x the amount of clarity and communication on where you're going, what the vision is, and what the purpose of this team's existence is. And the bigger it gets, it's even more difficult and more repetitious, but it's absolutely crucial to keep everyone on board.
Yeah.
Ike even had at one time new executives that he had hired, and they all said, where do we go? Where do we go? Right? And this is after funding. Where do we go? And so they want direction, no matter how experienced and talented they are.
And at that time, like you can't just tell them at the executive level. You have to help them own it.
Yeah.
Right? The dynamics are different. Like you, as a founder CEO, you always need to understand your audience. We're like we have to be a little bit of expert, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. Like when you're talking to engineers, you have to talk differently. When you're talking to the sales, you have to talk differently, and the board and investors are differently. So just try to recognize what you're talking to, and then step back and start from.
Benson, any other elements of what you look for? Because you went on the soft skills side. Is there anything else?
As far as people are concerned, or
investing, or looking into whether or not a CEO is the right profile for 2.0 at least.
Yeah.
In terms of venture funding.
You can also tell us about the product or market as well, like what type of dynamics you look for.
I think you mentioned self-awareness, and sometimes that can be manifest in the talent that is around the CEO and how they've staffed and structured their team thus far. And then if they can have an opinion on what they know they need, and then be receptive to perhaps what board input might be on what they need. That's kind of an interesting journey. Not everybody, self-awareness is really hard. So, you don't always know what you need. And sometimes you get anchored on something that, like a role that you want to go hire for. And it's helpful to kind of step back and go through that process really thoughtfully. I think then you kind of, we go to the next layer, which is like the problem and the product. I love to hear about the problem that they saw in the market that gave them the idea. One of our businesses is called Sticks, and it's a golf club maker. And I happen to love golf, right back here is my dad's first set of golf clubs, it's a hobby of mine. But the founder discovered that getting back into golf for the first time was actually kind of daunting. And all he really had was his dad's hand-me-down set of clubs or some like super expensive customized set that kind of intimidated him. And he didn't think he was ready to spend that much, or some like crappy set at Walmart. He's like, there's nothing good for the guy that is like me. So he built a set of clubs that was like perfect for the casual golfer. I love hearing that. I love hearing the problem. I like hearing how they've thoughtfully assessed the market. And, there was a lot of data behind why it was a good idea to pursue this. And so we think about the problem and how big it is. We think about the product and how well structured the product is, whether it's a software product or a physical product. Is it actually hitting the key points of that problem? And then we're at a stage where we don't do pre-revenue. So we actually want to see traction. We want to see how some of those customers have responded and what the feedback is and what the product roadmap looks like. It's a huge piece of it. But it doesn't matter how good your problem and your product are if you don't have the right people and the right leader, right? So that's why we kind of go in that order of priority. And then the third we'd get to is like financials and forecast and what the returns model might suggest as far as, how our money could be turned into something bigger.
Can I double click on the first one?
Sure.
I have a personal experience on this one. I was invited to be judge at the Pepperdine's Fundable Startups. And then there's a question there. The founders reply, like, tell me about your team, and then rate your employees, rate your co-founders, rate. Everybody answers 10 out of 10 for everybody. This is the best of the best of the best person. If everybody is doing it, obviously there's something wrong there. And then I had another founder who was struggling with his co-founder CTO. I was giving him directions and giving him more responsibility. Nothing was working because the CTO was cruising. Founder is hard charging 18 hours a day. And finally, after 6 months of me whispering in his ear, he let the CTO go, and the entire company lifted up, including engineering. Because that person was not 10 out of 10. Do you see that? When you talk, they are under the impression that their team is 10 out of 10 and they will be there forever. And there's some dynamic there for founders to get too attached to the team they have and how they there's nobody better than on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
The people side of it is so hard. I don't claim to have it all figured out because assessing skills and assessing character are very imperfect processes. I hope someday I'm better at it. And so I kind of empathize with founders and operators as they build their team, because they're caught in a tension point. I mean, there's a loyalty factor for those who have been with them from the beginning and have gotten them to a certain stage. And maybe you have some circumstances where founders are a little bit blind to whether some of those first loyal batch of leaders and contributors are fit for the next stage. But then on the flip side, there's so many examples of businesses and that, they get venture funding, the board pushes for high grading the talent, and then you kind of lose some of the culture, you lose some of the values. It totally changes the complexion of a business when you bring in a bunch of outside leadership, and sometimes it works and sometimes it's too much. And so I really empathize with the CEO and the founder that has to receive outside feedback from a board, for example.
Be coachable.
Yeah, right. It's I want them to be receptive, but I don't necessarily want to force any like personnel changes on them that could completely overturn their culture. And so they have to have the conviction who the right hires are, who the right like talent needs are, what the right talent needs are, and so forth. I like your point. I think that there is a tendency to overrate.
Yeah, I think Binoy taught me this, so I'm not like invented myself. But in early of my career, Binoy, please chime in here. You're the expert on this one. I put being likable in front of the business, and then I learned later on with some coaching. I have to grow up, be the leader of the company, and this position requires me to give solid feedback to all the people around me. Candid feedback, like celebrate the successes, but the failures, don't ignore them, don't put under the rug. If you take that approach, in my opinion, then everybody kind of grows with you together in the company. And when the time comes for a change, nobody is surprised. If you want to be liked more, and if you want to build a family rather than high functioning sports team, then things are going to blow up someday.
Yeah, as I've thought about how my hobby intersects with life and business, I love golf. I mentioned that. And there's only so much in the game of golf that you can control. You have the grass condition, you can't control that. You have weird bounces where you end up in spots you don't want to be in. You have weather, wind, rain, shadows. Those are all things you can't control. The only thing you can control is your process, your approach, the effort you put into executing that swing, and then how you react to it and then get ready for the next one. That's what you can control. You can't even control where the golf ball goes, really. I mean, especially me at my skill level, but
unless you have golf clubs from your portfolio company.
That's right. Yes.
That's an exception.
It changes everything. Yeah. But I think what you said about, what you care most about and what you're trying to control for, you can't control how people react to you. You can't control how they feel about you. You can't control how they talk about you. And that gets really hard sometimes for founders that want to be liked. Nobody wants to be hated. We all want to be liked, but I think it's really helpful to think about that analogy of, you can only control what you can control. You can be the leader you feel like the business needs to be. And sometimes that's going to cause a little bit of pain and maybe even heartache towards you. You can't control how they feel.
Good. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I thank you for the reminder. I remember those days. And by the way, it's still continuing with other CEOs, right? We're all in the world of wanting to be having more followers and likes than not. Yeah. Benson, do you have any advice, bullet points for anyone getting into funding, wanting to get funded, or those who've been funded so that they can make good use of the resources, the dry powder moving forward? Any advice on either side? We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, whether you're getting ready to fundraise or you have recently accepted new capital, to me, every business and every business leader has to think about prioritization. I think it's a superpower. I think it's also a plague. That the lack of prioritization is a plague in business. This realization came to me as I was a consultant at Bain, where we were working with businesses of all sizes and industries, of great variety. And every single project I worked on, there was an issue of prioritization. Every single leader we interacted with, there was a challenge of lacking prioritization. And so I think it starts there, because when you think about prioritization, such as the vision and connecting to the vision of where we're going, you start to say no to things. And so if you're getting ready to fundraise, you have to think about what milestones are most critical towards this vision that would be valuable proof that the next phase of growth is possible. And then once you have the capital, you've got to have the discipline to say no to all the many things that are shiny and bright and interesting so that you can stay focused on the next milestones. I recognize that can sound counterintuitive to this notion of like coachability and pivoting, right? But it actually isn't counterintuitive. No. I think prioritization will allow you to be super focused, make high value decisions, and your workload should be more focused as a result. And that is something that I would love to see founders teach and kind of embed in their values, so that as they recruit, they're recruiting people that want to be priority-oriented people.
Can you expand on prioritizing versus or / maybe focus? Like, like where everybody is gonna focus on. The reason I'm bringing this up is I've heard this before. Sometimes when I talk to VCs, because VCs have the blueprint of great companies.
Yeah.
The great companies can supercharge their sales. Their product is better than everybody else. Their brand is recognized by the world, and operationally they're excellent. And then the VC comes, I'll give you 500K, but I want you to increase the brand recognition, hire more salespeople, double your engineering so your product is better, and then also hire a CFO or COO to run the company. Oh, wait a minute, like with 500K for the next 2 years, maybe it's like priority is maybe the focus, so that if you focus your product into one vertical domain maybe, or one customer type maybe. Can you like tell us a little bit more about like how you're thinking about the prioritization? Is it compartmentalizing it in go-to-market side, or you go after product versus brand? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So at a very high level, I think about a triangle that is, one point is people and resources, one point is time, and the other point is scope. Scope being how much is in play or not. And if you're going to increase scope, you have to flex the time or people / resources, or both. You can't just increase scope, or you're going to burn out your people or run out of time, And we used that framework in consulting internally when we would think about scope creep. There's lots of interesting things we could tackle. How do I fit that in my day? Either I need more time, or you need to decrease my scope elsewhere, or we need more people. And I think at the business, entrepreneur level, I think that framework really is useful. When I think about prioritization, it's about understanding in some type of ranked order what initiatives are most essential to our journey towards the vision. And so, if you wanted to get really like kind of quantitative about it, you could identify all of your initiatives that seem to be floating and being worked on in some way. And there might be, to your point, maybe 20 plus of these things that are happening. But if you can define it and then like map it on some, level of like effort and impact, and, how do these things matter? How important are they? Because if you're really like crisp on your vision, then suddenly 20 becomes 3.
And I'll add one thing though, and the courage, you mentioned this before, Benson, courage to say no when something comes up. Like sales guy comes, if you build this feature, we're gonna get 20K deal. Yeah. You have to have the courage to say, this is our list, this is all we can handle. We're gonna create 400K of ARR if we do this, right?
Yeah. Yes. I will add, I think, prioritization is one like superpower. I think selling is another superpower. And entrepreneurs, whether they think of themselves as salespeople or not, they are a salesperson. You might be an engineer that has built this really brainy, cool product, and it's just so well structured and architected. But if you're the founder CEO, you also have to be able to sell it to people you want to hire, investors who you want to have, put their money in. You've got to sell it to your customers. And initially, there probably isn't a full-time salesperson. It's you. Eventually, you have a sales staff. And so I think just like embracing that is a really important thing early on. You're always going to be a salesperson. You're selling the vision. When we talk about beating the drum, right? You're selling the vision every day.
Yeah. Can I ask this question that I've been meaning to ask for a long time, because I was in the seat of looking for money from multiple companies. Do you, as a VC investor, take advantage of, or would you recommend that prospective founders change the lens from looking at an investor in which they're selling to as, they know everything. They're on a pedestal to saying, look, we're just business people, we're doing our own, or it's advantageous for you to say, yes, I do know, and you should know that. This happens. And you both are smiling. Well, what's the thing to do? What advice would you give to these entrepreneurs? How to approach the whole fundraising game? What lens should they put on?
I think humility is great, but don't subject yourself to like a lower pedestal relative to investors. I mean, we're peers, and eventually, if there is a board relationship, the only difference in my mind is the fact that the board has a fiduciary responsibility to assess your performance as a CEO, and that is more of like an employer-employee kind of dynamic. But that is a very specific like function of a board member. Other than that, it should be like a peer-like or maybe a mentor-advisor-like relationship, but it doesn't need to be this, the board member doesn't know everything. The investor doesn't know everything, but nor does the founder, and I think it's just recognizing like, hey, I want to work with great people, whether they're working for me or working with me at the board level. I want people to back me who are open-minded, collaborative, and like doers. I don't want a board that's going to sit there and do nothing. I need them to do stuff with me. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, Binoy, but I think approaching it from a level of confidence that it's more of a peer-like relationship than it is some kind of like ivory tower to, plea. Yeah.
I think like both have different kinds of qualities bring to the table. Like I think VCs are good at recognizing patterns, especially patterns from the successful companies, but they are not in the business. They don't think about the business 24/7 like an entrepreneur do, and know every person you have with the strengths and weakness and all that, all the dynamics, and board doesn't talk to customers every other day. But if they switch roles, like the founder doesn't stop talking to the customers and disconnected from the customers, and the VC starts saying, like, well, this is how I would have operated in my HR, HR policy book, like then the things are going cross, and then everything crumbles.
Yep. Well said.
I agree with that, Ike. Well said. We're always going to run out of time. I have one question that I've had on my mind to ask you, Benson. After investment, what do you see as the one element of behavior, trait, whatever, that ruins the opportunity by the founder? Even with all the resources and whatever, what one thing would you say ruins their opportunity to make the dream come true, and clearly no ROI back to all investors?
Being afraid of failure or bad news generally. Okay, so when you're a founder and you're living and breathing your business, you are the reason it's standing up today. And you want to project positive news upward to the board all the time. I mean, that like a happy board makes for a happy board meeting and a smooth kind of governance process, right? But we all know that no business is perfect, and especially early stage companies, first time founders, there's all kinds of pitfalls and problems and mistakes. There's waste. These are realities of business. It's a messy journey. And sometimes things don't go the way that we had forecast. And I think I always make sure I try to appreciate when a CEO and a founder is coming to me with bad news. It's not, I mean, if you're a parent, you understand how you want to handle, a child who has made a mistake. Like if you want a culture where red is good, meaning like in a traffic light setting where you've got green, yellow, red, I want to see a culture where red is good, because that means you're willing to face something that went wrong, find out a root cause, develop a process to prevent it from happening again, and on to the next we go. I think that is a really important trait for founders, because board members want to be helpful. They want to add value, and they can't add real value unless they're aware of the challenges that you're facing. And I want to just tie this into golf one more time, beg your pardon. But you learn more about yourself in recovery than you do in perfection. If you hit a perfect shot down the fairway and then the next shot is right next to the pin and you tap it in for a birdie, you feel great and you've at least taught yourself that you're capable of that. But most of the time the ball goes offline, you find yourself in a position where you have to recover, and you learn a lot more about yourself recovering than you do perfect execution. And I think that is so much the life of an entrepreneur, which is it's full of imperfection. The journey is full of surprises and things not going right. You want to learn about yourself in that recovery process. That's when you find out what you're made of.
That's an awesome one,
isn't it? That I've always been I've been scribbling notes, mate. So yes, I couldn't agree more. By the way, Ike, now you know why I really like Benson, because his approach is abundance. It's inclusive. I will say this though, Benson, having been around the block, it only takes one turdish board member to ruin things when that board member then attacks that poor CEO wanting to share negative news and whatever. And it does negatively impact the future and subsequent sharing of bad news. Wouldn't you agree?
I would totally agree. And you can't, and this is kind of going back to you can control what you can control. Yeah. Some board members are not going to have the same philosophy I do. Yeah. But for the boards that I sit on, I definitely want to project that sentiment. And if it ends up being something that we just handle one-on-one, that's great. I'm good with that too. But I don't want them to feel like they can't come to me.
Ike, well, that's just terrific, right?
Yeah,
terrific.
Awesome. Benson, maybe I know we're running out of time. I have one more question. Like anything that you noticed second or third time founders do, the first times don't, like I'm trying to find nuggets for our first time founders to level up. Anything that you noticed there, any stories?
I don't know if I have a good story for it, but I think some observation that I have is that, you know, when you've been through the movie a time or two, you actually are a little better about what you say yes and no to. So there's some virtue in that for sure. Like you just have a little more courage. Like that doesn't matter, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think early on for a first timer, you just feel like everything matters. And so, yeah, like if we have beat this prioritization idea to a pulp, that's probably, it's probably what's happening here. But I think that a little more experience tends to allow yourself the ability to say yes and no, maybe a little easier.
Ike, what do you think of that?
Yeah, awesome.
Benson, fantastic. Any parting words? I'm sorry we ran out of time. We always do. But you've been fantastic. I know you had a lot more. Any parting words to the listeners and viewers?
This could be an intro to our second segment with you as well.
We may need you another time around, dude.
I don't know. I was thinking about the culture. We at Bain, we had a culture that was very results oriented. And at the time, I loved that. It resonated with me in great ways. As I've gone on in my career, I mean, we all want great results, you know, up and to the right. We want 10x returns and all these things. Those are all results. I think I've gotten a greater appreciation of process, because while results ultimately are a way of measuring success or progress, to me, process is more important, because that speaks to the journey that you're on, and that this can be like as big as you want it to be, right? I mean, it can be life, it can be the moment you're in. But it also can be like, you know, the process that you go through to kind of execute this project or initiative or job that you have to do. The more thoughtful you are about process, the better you can make that process. And you can think about refining it to actually yield the eventual result that you're striving for. So I've just come to better appreciate, although I was kind of raised in a culture of results, I think process it says more about your character.
I'm trying to dissect it. Are you saying, like, as a team, if you have a process going after a challenge or outcome, even if you're not successful at that moment, that process as a team will help you when you change course, and then your chances of being successful more because you went through a process before? Is it like that, or?
Let me give you an example. So in a sales setting, the best sales teams have repetitive processes. They have description of steps that you go through. You have qualification and discovery, and then you work your way through the funnel, and you have, it's very, very prescriptive. And the best sales leaders I've seen are like process. They're strict on process because they know that if there's a breakdown in process, that can be fixed, and that the process eventually will yield, great results. And so whether it's a team or a function or an individual, you're better suited to go root cause and fix the problem if you have identified your process.
Gotcha. It's like implement processes that you can control the outcomes and build a scalable business through processes by iterating through the process and improve them over time rather than one-offs.
Yeah, exactly. Because if it's ad hoc and you're just like totally focused on results, then that sales rep got there this way and that sales rep got there this way, and you have no repeatability in your business.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, makes sense.
Beautiful advice. I put process bigger than results as a summary of that one. Fantastic. Hey, thank you, Benson. Sincerely.
Yeah.
Superb wisdom, great experience, much and continued success. And like Ike said, we may call on you again because we ran out of time. And Ike, any other comments? We're going to close up.
No, thank you, Benson.
Thanks, Ike. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks all. Until next time, tune in. Please share this with everyone that you can think of that would benefit with Benson's great advice. Thanks.